This one. Can everyone hear me and see me? Please let us know in the chat box. Everyone is currently muted. If you experience any technical issues at any point, please use the chat at the bottom of your screen. Someone from our team is actively monitoring the chat and will assist you. Feel free to submit questions at any time. Type your questions into the chat as they come to mind. We will collect them and ask them on your behalf during the question and answer at the end of the presentation. Live Q&A at the end. When we reach the Q&A portion, we will enable the option for you to unmute if you prefer to ask your question directly to our presenter. Please turn your camera off during the presentation. This helps conserve bandwidth and ensures the speaker remains the primary focus for everyone. This session is being recorded. The recording will be shared with members after the meeting. Okay. Okay, now we're calling our business meeting to order. Announcements. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peggy Harder. Since July 1st, I have been the president for next 2 years of the Genealogical Society. That's it. Was a new fiscal year, and I want to thank all of you for coming tonight, whether you're here in person or whether you're out there. Thank you for being here with us. We have a couple reports to make. The treasurer's report. Randy, can you come up here and go to the water?
Okay, the treasurer's report for the month of June. We started with a checking account balance of $52.67. We had receipts during the month of $1,393, which was mostly membership dues and donations. We had disbursements of $2,532, which was largely rent and social fees for the annual dinner meeting. So our checking account balance at the end of the month is $4,129. Our investment balance at the beginning of the month was $161,442. Due to reinvested dividends and growth of the investments, we ended the month with an investment balance of $164,172. So our total assets at the end of June are $168,301. For the people who are at the meeting, they can see the details of this report on the refreshment table.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Randy. Projects, Laurel, do you have anything you want to say about projects? No report. Social, I'm the social chair. Last month, we had our annual June dinner meeting. We had 20 people there. The food was really good. It was from Catherine's Catering. And our speaker, Paul Drisba, talked about writing in old postcards. And it was very nice. He showed some postcards that I had never seen. And I learned a couple things from it. And everybody enjoyed it. So those of you who couldn't make it, sorry, but it was a good program. Does anybody here have any questions about anything we've said so far? Okay. Programs, Betty, but you can do that before you introduce programs about what you're having next month. Do you know?
Yes.
Okay, well, you can mention that later, okay? Okay, so that, pardon?
I mentioned that. September tour.
Yeah, you can. You
have to come up here.
Yeah.
People didn't call me in here.
Okay, this is for
September. In September, we usually have a picnic at a church out somewhere in Berks County. This year, we're going to have it at a church in Ole. The details are still being worked out, but what we plan to do is have a self-guided, well, sort of a tour, but instead of renting a bus, we can either carpool or follow each other. And I'll have a map, and there are a lot of historic sites in Ole, and I'm trying to arrange a tour of the Turk House, which is on the National Register of Historic Places, along with a few other things. So just keep that in mind. The tentative date is September 12th, Saturday, September 12th, and there'll be more details coming in August.
Thank you, Laurel. Um, Betty, did you want to say anything about the programs in the future?
Yes, I will.
Okay, that would be,
Our program next month will be John Kissinger, who will give a program on DNA today. He'll be very interesting. He was here before, so make sure you tune in. You'll learn a few things. Following that will be the program that Laurel just talked about to Oli. And in October, our next person will be here to speak will be Mr. Miller from the Ephrata Cloisters. His subject matter has not been decided at this point, but he'll be somebody you don't want to miss to hear. Thank you very much.
okay, thank you, Betty. That is the end of our business meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. Who's- Second, okay. Okay, it's been, the motion's been made, it's been, seconded. Everybody in favor? Say aye. Opposed? Okay, that ends our business meeting, and now we'll turn it over to Betty, who's going to introduce our speaker for the evening. Good.
Our speaker is Rick Polityka. I cannot say his name the way it should be. Polityka. He's been a longtime member and volunteered at the Berks County History Center, and an avid person involved in all kinds of historical things for our area. And tonight it will be his program to have a walking tour through our very beautiful Charles Evans Cemetery. So you're in for a treat. Rick?
That's good.
Right.
Get me started here and
Sure.
ready to roll.
Oh, I have to turn on the projector too, excuse me. Oh.
And that would make it work.
Yeah, that would help, wouldn't it? Yeah, and this one, right? Is it this one? Yes, it should be that one, I think, or is it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know why it shows kind of like two of them.
there we go.
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
Okay, so then I just gotta hit the. red button.
It's not just advance it. I don't think.
Okay,
Oh, it's not share. Whoops, hold on.
Maybe.
Let's try
Wait.
the other.
hang on.
Oh, sorry.
Um,
Oops, do we have to? No, I think I forgot to click the button share.
Oh,
I did it.
okay.
Oh,
Easy there, easy. We using the right one for in the program?
I think, well, you mean this?
That's the
Notes.
next slide.
That's your next slide.
Yeah, the notes in the left. Okay,
Yeah,
good enough.
Just to tell you.
Oh,
Okay. All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Rick Polityka, and tonight we're going to be talking about Charles Evans Cemetery, its founder, its history. I look at that cemetery not only as a cemetery, which obviously it is, but I look at it also as an art piece, because some of the pieces of some of the sculptures that are in there and some of the sculptors that made some of those pieces are quite well renowned. The cemetery was founded in 1846. It was originally only 25 acres in the beginning. Now it's 122 acres. But let me see how we can start this off here. Go to the next slide. Oh, that's not it.
And
Enter. How about that? There we go. Hello. Okay. So the cemetery was founded about 150 years ago. This is off of the front of the off of their brochure that they actually have, and it offers the difference of the cemetery that we have. The way you're going to see it in one of the upcoming slides here is the beginning of the cemetery. It was the beginning of the park-like setting that was very big at that time. It was not like a grid like most cemeteries you would see, where they would actually have the park-like with the meandering, pathways, and they emphasized as much as trees and decorum as far as within the cemetery, as well as just having a place for a burial. So it was that park-like atmosphere that we see in the cemetery. And we'll be talking about some of the different monuments that are inside the cemetery and some of the symbolism that's involved with them also as well. So it was obviously a very peaceful place. I myself, as from history of it, I can tell you I don't know how many thousands of miles I've logged walking in that cemetery over the so many years. I've been going in there since I was a kid, so that's pretty much. I still use it to this day as a place that I can just go relax. Yes, and during the fall and then the spring, we also do our cemetery tours. That's me, and that is as dressed as Charles Evans, and that is Michelle Lynch, and she's dressed as Mary Evans. So we lead our well-spirited and well-attended cemetery tours, where we take you around and we visit a couple of people that we bring back to life for a night, or for an afternoon, I should say. The last one was a little difficult because it rained the entire time, so that actually did put a challenge to it. But mostly the weather's usually always been pretty good, and we have done this now. I think this is like our third or fourth year that we've been doing it. So we've been doing about 9 or 10 different ones that we do every year, that we go visit some of the graves. We'll be probably reprising our role again in late October, October 24th to be exact. So if you look at the map here, and you see from the gate is on the very low end of the right-hand side, you'll see that big red area right along Center Avenue. That's where the gate is, and that is part. If you see a little bit of the loop that goes through, the original plot of Charles Evans Cemetery wasn't actually a squared off piece of land. It did actually, the path kind of gives you the idea as to where it went. I don't have a pointer to show, but yeah, go ahead if you don't mind. That would be
I can do it. Can I
Mary
do
Evans
that?
here
No,
to
you
do that.
can't. Okay, I thought maybe using the cursor I could do it, but all right.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So,
Oop.
so basically, like the original 25 acres was very here, and that's the gate right there.
Okay, very good. This is an aerial view. This is actually in the cemetery, in the office. So the points that we look at here in the very bottom, we see a pretty much brand new St. Margaret's Church and Rectory. Right down below us at the very bottom, we see that the Third and Spring Playground wasn't even a Third and Spring Playground at that time yet. We see in the cemetery itself, we can see the gate along Center Avenue. We see Sterling Mansion kind of across the way. We also see within there, it's kind of hard unless Michelle would point it out for me, is the fact that you can see where the chapel is, but we'll get a good picture of that. Yeah, I see it myself. It's right a little further up. Further up. Up in the air. Up higher. Keep. Yeah, you're in the neighborhood, but okay, never mind. Now it's a little further in. Now you see it. There you go. Hello. Hello. There we go. Thing that's pretty neat about this is when you look at the overall picture, not only just the cemetery, you get to see George Field out North Fifth Street, and you actually get to see one of the pools of water that the Reading Company used for loading up the steam engines with water, as well as right next to that pool of water that's along Fifth Street. You also get to see the roundhouse kind of underneath the black smoke a little bit, or the black cloud that's in that picture. This picture is probably, since the church was built 1921, this is probably shortly after it was built. So this is the early 1920s. Here is a portrait of Charles Evans. I'm actually going to grab my glasses so I can read a little better here. He lived to witness profound effects of the Industrial Revolution, when changes in agriculture, manufacturing, mining, transportation, and technology transformed not only the social and economic conditions, but culture itself in the arts as well.
Did you say when he was born?
He was born in 1768 in Philadelphia, and he died in 1847, I believe it was. He came to Reading 1791, and he married Mary in 1794. Okay, hang on here. Okay, what am I doing here?
Next slide.
It's not sliding on me.
What?
Yeah, return's not working here because I touched the screen. That's why.
What about that?
That worked. Yeah.
Hmm. Um,
Oh God. Hello.
this bar is in the way. Try that.
That works. Okay. This is the statue of Charles Evans that was erected in 1864. And the one thing that we'd like to look at here is the pointed trees that you see. Notice the pointed landscaping that's within the cemetery. What's that? I can't.
Move this back a little bit.
Oh, now I gotta go in a little bit.
Wow. Okay.
There, that's a little better. There we go. Okay. Better. He was born March 30th, 1768, and he was one of four children, four surviving children of David and Leta Thomas. And they were members of the Gwinnett Friends Montgomery. He was a Quaker. So just to keep that in mind, he was a Quaker. So as Quakers, David Evans, if we go to our next slide here, here's another photograph of the more current photograph of the monument to Charles Evans. David Evans, as a Quaker, during the Revolutionary War era time, the Quakers they didn't take sides. They didn't take sides with the Loyalists. They didn't take sides with the colonists that were supporting the revolution. However, the Loyalists thought that they were favoring the colonists, and the colonists thought they were favoring the Loyalists. So they were like kind of stuck in no man's land a little bit. Depending on who you were as far as being a Quaker, if being in that kind of situation, if you did not have some kind of credence with the colonials, or and most likely in the colonials, you were probably going to be sent to a internment camp. David Evans did not have that issue because he was well known by Benjamin Franklin. He actually was a builder. Carpenter's Hall was something that he had helped. He was a cabinet maker. He was a shipbuilder, and he was and he also did a lot of stuff with wood, obviously, as I'm talking about. But he actually was helped. So Franklin definitely did know David Evans, so that he kind of didn't have to worry about. He had, I guess, if you want to say, a pass. As much as they were non-committal one way or the other within the revolution, or with the conflict at the time, he was not subjected to some of the issues that some of the other Quakers were. Here is a replica of in town here of Carpenter's Hall, and that is at our Penn Bank at 8th and Penn Streets. This is what it looked like when it was first built. And here is a picture of what it looks like today. They did a lot to restore that front corner because it was a storefront at one point, and so they did make a lot of change there. So when Charles Evans had come to Reading, he was obviously he studied law under Benjamin Chew. We'll get to him in a little bit, but when he studied law, he would have studied law and he would have practiced law here at the courthouse. When he first was admitted to the bar in 1791, he was one of about 5 or 6 other gentlemen that actually had been admitted to the bar at that point. But with Philadelphia, they already had about 28 lawyers in the Philadelphia area. So there's going to be a lot of competition amongst the inhabitants of Philadelphia to be able to, render services, or provide services for the population. So they were actually encouraged to go out into the country, and Reading would have been part of the country, and do the circuit out in the country and take cases that way. So that is what Charles actually did do. Let me just see some of my notes in here. Yeah, I guess I pretty much said everything that's in there. But so this would have been the courthouse where he would have been doing he would have practiced his law right in the middle of Penn Square. This is a painting from of Charles Evans from the cemetery collection. This actually is on the wall. He stood at 6'1". I always kind of tell people when I'm doing my reenactments at 5'8", I said if you spend 175 years inside a wooden box, you too will lose about 3 inches off your height. So that's everyone seems to enjoy that. But he stood 6'1". He was quite a striking figure as far as that was concerned. I guess if you would look at him, talk about him in today's terminology, and you would put his body in today's world, he would have been considered athletic. I mean, definitely he liked to walk a lot. Something that I have in common with him a lot also. We both like to walk. And he studied under Benjamin Chew, one of the most prominent lawyers, and also another one who was a Quaker and who actually also during the Revolution wasn't actually in a detention camp or whatever, if you would like to call it, but he was actually under what you would consider house arrest because he actually did have some prominent positions, and he later became Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. So Benjamin Chew's who he studied under, and here is Benjamin Chew. So he was, like I said, during the Revolution, he was under house arrest. And one of the things that was very prominent that happened during the Revolution that directly and indirectly affected him was the Battle of Germantown, which was fought at his house at Cliveden. The story as it goes was that this was actually one of the turning points of the Revolution. This actually was one of the couple of things that had happened at the same time that persuaded France, with Benjamin Franklin's insistence and persuasion, to actually join our side in the revolution. And what the French really did help us with more than anything else was they really helped neutralize the British Navy more than anything else. But Cliveden, what had happened was we had fought the Battle of Germantown, with Brandywine with the British. We had lost that battle. And what had happened at that time was when we lost that battle, it was for the battle for Philadelphia when you get right down to it. And the issue that you had coming up was what did Washington need to do? Did he need to defend Philadelphia, or did he need to defend his supplies in Reading? Because Reading was the supply house at that time. Now we were as much as we didn't have a actual physical involvement in any of the battles of the war, we were very important because we definitely supplied the clothing, we supplied the food, we supplied the munitions, we supplied all the big things. And also we were this was this was considered the backcountry in Reading here at that point. So he decided to retreat back to Pottsgrove. And it's always kind of a very interesting story. When the Battle of Germantown started, Washington marched his troops from Pottsgrove, and he marched them about 25 miles in down to Germantown in the middle of the night. Surprised the British at Germantown in the morning, first thing in the morning, which they had a very elaborate plan that didn't really necessarily was never going to really work, because it was very detailed, and the quality of his troops were not able to handle that kind of intricate battle attack that he had. But regardless, they did take them by surprise, and Cliveden was actually the turning point of the battle, because the British holed themselves up in the house, and the house was very, very, they fortified it, and but the Continentals decided they wanted to try and, get the British out of the house. So they actually concentrated on that. What that actually wound up doing was it allowed the British that were routed from the field in the very beginning to regroup, and they were able to come back and take the field. So Washington had to retreat back up to Pottsgrove. And that's the interesting part of that story, because when you think about how much they marched in the middle of the night, fought a battle, and they marched all the way back to Pottsgrove, they probably walked about 45 miles, fought a battle in the meantime. That's a lot of moving around. But with that being said, that's just the revolutionary story of Benjamin Chew's home at Cliveden. So we were off the beaten path a little bit, though. Moving on, like again, when I had said in the beginning, when Charles started, he was riding the circuit route. So he would ride his way as far north and east as Easton, and he rode as far north and west as Sunbury. And that was his circuit route. So what he had done in the beginning was he actually still had practice in Philadelphia, and he actually had practice out of Reading, but he rode the circuit route out of Reading. So he would go to these other locales to conduct his business. He was very, very good at, conducting his business. He definitely made a lot of money in his time doing this. But what he would do is he would spend his time in Philadelphia from November until June. And then June, he would make the couple-day trip up the Philadelphia Pike to Reading, where he would actually, in the beginning, and he would actually then do the circuit route. Then once these other communities that he would go to started becoming more established, then he would probably I think the first one that left him was probably the Sunbury route, because that was a little bit further out than Easton. Here's Mary. Would Mrs. Evans like to talk about Mary Evans? Come on over. Don't be afraid. Over this way. Over this way.
I'll have to look in front of the screen. They were married in 1794, and Mary's maiden name was Keene. When she was a 9-year-old child, she lived in Reading with her parents for a brief time during the British occupation of Philadelphia from September 1777 to June 1778. And her parents were part of a group of about 30 refugee families who came to Reading from Philadelphia at that time because they were patriots, and it was unsafe for them to stay in Philadelphia during the occupation. So these are her parents, Reynold and Christiana Stilley Keene, and they're Reynold and Christiana Keene's youngest daughter, Sarah, was born in Reading on November 1st, 1777. And Christiana died. We don't know exactly when, and sources are conflicting, but Jacob Hiltzheimer wrote in his diary that he rode from Angelica. He was one of the refugees, and he was staying at Angelica with with Thomas Mifflin. And he rode over from Angelica on December 3rd to serve as pallbearer. So we do know what day she was buried. She was buried at the Christ Church graveyard, which was at 6th and Walnut Streets, December 5th. I'm sorry, it was December 5th, 1777. And so young Mary and her 9 siblings, one being a newborn baby, were left motherless, and they were left in the care of their aunt, Sarah Barry, who was married to Captain John Barry, later Commodore John Barry, father of the American Navy. And Reynold, he had business interests in Philadelphia. They were a merchant family, and he had written to some friends to take care of things. But after some time in February of 1778, he found it necessary to travel to Philadelphia himself to attend to business. And that cast suspicions upon him. And so letters were written to the Pennsylvania Council, and his property was seized, and he was ordered to appear before the court. He claimed he never got the letter, and he didn't appear before court. He later was able to get the whole matter to kind of go away by signing the oath of allegiance to Pennsylvania. But before that could happen, all the family's goods were seized and sold at an auction on Penn Square in February 18th, 1778. And Sally Barry tried to stop it. She wrote letters to the Pennsylvania Council saying she's a patriot. The family are patriots. She's the wife of Captain John Barry. And she was basically told, well, if you want anything, you have to bid on it yourself. So she did, and the auction report survives, and it's typed up in the archives, our state archives, and you can see her name next to many different items, mostly furniture and kitchen utensils, cooking needs, that sort of thing. But among the items that were auctioned off, there were 2 enslaved women, and one of them brought, I'm not going to be able to remember, I think 30 pounds, and the other one brought 120 pounds. So we did know that there was a teenage girl and there was an old woman who were with enslaved people who were with the family. So I'm guessing that the old lady is the one who brought in the lower price, because her years of working, she didn't have a lot of years of working ahead of her, whereas the young woman, or the girl, she was young and strong and had many years of work ahead of her. So it's a very sad story, and we do know who bought them. We don't know if he was acting on behalf of the family. He may have been. It was Peter Ozias, who was the barracks inspector, later the inspector general for the army. And he was in Reading inspecting the hospitals. The hospitals, which Rick could tell you, that's another whole story. But the hospitals, the makeshift hospitals at the courthouse, at the old Trinity Lutheran Church, which was a log church, and at the old Friends Meeting House.
Getting off the base.
Getting off the base. They were just horrible. And Ozias wrote a report.
For another time.
A talk for another time. Okay. All right. Okay. So Charles Evans was very influenced by Chew, and during the Battle of Germantown, as the cannonballs whizzed at Cliveden and knocked out a parapet, he had kind of a change in his opinions about being a pacifist, and he came to believe that using force in self-defense was acceptable, and he taught he had a lot of influence on Charles Evans. And we know that Charles Evans, and I'm getting ahead of the story here too, but Charles Evans was a founding member of the Reading Artillerists. So we know that he did not practice his Quaker faith. he adopted the faith of his wife, who was raised as an Anglican and later Episcopalian. And when they were in Reading, they worshiped at Christ Church, but at the older church, not the one that has this Edward Potter designed steeple there. That was the architect
the Civil War.
who, yes, thank you. The architect who also designed Mark Twain's house in Hartford, Connecticut, designed that. So they worshiped at the older church, but in the associated graveyard, which was at 6th and Walnut, where Mary's mother was where Mary's mother was buried, Charles and Mary buried their 5 infant children, who I don't know if they were stillborn or if they died shortly after birth or whatever happened. So they really had no surviving children. And also Mary's younger sister, Christiana, who lived with Charles and Mary in Reading, died in 1800 and was buried there. So I'll let Rick take this back.
That way. Okay. And when they were both married, and they went to Christ Church in Reading, they also went to Christ Church in Philadelphia as well. So this is just they lived down on York Row. They had Charles didn't own his home on York Row all that long. But we'll get into that a little bit further. And when Michelle was talking about joining the Reading Artillerists, here is a Reading Battalion Days, which was presided over by General Winfield Scott. This was in one of the passing scenes from George Miser. And this is also Charles Evans would have been involved in this even at 1842, because he was involved with it right up to the end of his life.
We know that he attended this.
So what we're looking at here is when Charles first came to Reading, he did stay at the home of Bodo Otto. No. I think it's I think it's that one. Yeah. Yeah. The white store is the Conrad Weiser trading post. So it was the first tall one that you see there that was his home.
Is this from the model at the history?
It is.
Yes. And I could lie and say we flew a drone back in 1777, but I don't think you'd believe me on that one. Yeah. That would be a tall tale I'd be telling you. But no, that was Bodo Otto passed away, I believe, in 1790, I believe it was, right after the war, actually. And then after that, Charles actually, he got his house he lived there, leased it, rented it, however you want to say. And then when he actually wound up buying his other home later on, I'll go over that whole basis. Bodo Otto was chief surgeon to George Washington during the Revolution. So he was a chief surgeon at Valley Forge. And another gentleman who was involved with Charles and his properties was also at Valley Forge also. I'll talk to him about him in a little bit. But York Row, this is York Row, constructed 1807. Charles bought a home down here, I believe, in 1818, I believe it was. 1815. And then by 1828, he had sold it. So he only lived here for about 13 years. Because by 1825, I believe it was, he decided to end his practice in Philadelphia, and he concentrated himself solely in Reading. And when he concentrated himself solely in Reading, this was his house on South Fifth Street, or at the time when he bought it, it was still South Callow Hill Street. So where we are looking at this, if you look at the area, the building that you see standing right next to it, that would have been called the auditorium, which basically on South Fifth Street, if you go south from the library, on the opposite side of the library, there's an open space where a parking lot. That's where the auditorium was. So Charles Evans's home was standing right next to that.
So if you're standing on the steps of the Reading Public Library, looking across the street, there's a laundromat. this building, which was a greenhouse at that time, but this photo was taken. But in Charles Evans' lifetime, it was his garden. And he would walk a figure-8 loop. How many miles did he walk that
It was a 1/8, so he walked it 8 times and
to get a mile?
get a mile out of it. So he was quite the fashionable walker as far as that was concerned too. So when I say that, there was the other common denominator out of the Bodo Otto, Charles Evans triangle, the other one was John Keim, because John Keim was one of the wealthiest men in colonial Reading at that time. He's the one who leased the Bodo Otto home to Charles Evans, and he's also the one who sold Charles Evans this home on South Callow Hill Street.
It's his home, right?
I believe. Yeah.
Mhm.
So Charles Evans, as much as he went to, by the time Mary had passed away in 1836, he had kind of not, went back to his Quaker ways a little bit. But as much as the Quaker Meeting House on North 6th Street, or North Prince Street, if you want to call it at that time, that was not actually where the meeting house was at that time. The Quaker Meeting House did own that property. They owned it from the Revolutionary wartime. They briefly ran a meeting house there, but then they kept the property. And actually, during the Revolution, that property was used as a field hospital for the sick. From the wounded from the war. But the Friends Meeting House was moved to 4th and Washington, or better known as at that time King and Thomas Streets. But Charles never went to the King and Thomas Streets Friends house. He would always make his way either to the Exeter Friends Meeting House or this one on Ohlone. And he used to always like to take the ride out. So when we do our tours, I always like to say that Charles Evans invented the Sunday drive. So just only kidding, but he used to like to take his drive out to Ohlone to the Friends Meeting House as opposed to going to the one in town. Here is the image of the Gothic Revival entrance gate that was started under Charles Evans. He never got to see it completed. In this drawing that you see out on the center turnpike, we get to see what the gate looked like. We can see the cottage, the original cottage on the side here, which is, yes, is right there. And we'll talk about that in a little bit too. So this was the garden cemetery. This was the park-like garden cemetery. This was the new wave. Laurel Hill was the one that kind of got the ball going down in Philadelphia. And Laurel Hill today, compared to Charles Evans Cemetery, is quite, wide and expansive in the lanes that are in the cemetery, because they had more room to go than Laurel Hill, because Laurel Hill truly is on a hill and it's very tight in that area. But they did have the same concept there, but Charles Evans Cemetery took it to another level, I think, with that, as far as being able to spread out a little bit more.
The trustees, when Charles Evans established the cemetery, he appointed 13 trustees from among his trusted friends and associates. And the trustees hired the firm of Carper and Hall to design the gateway and to lay out the original 25 acres. And from the minutes, we can see Hall really didn't have anything to do with it. It was all John Carver. And so he designed that gateway, and it was that Gothic Revival architecture was such a new thing to Reading in the 1840s that the Masons were really having a tough time with it. And they had to bring in Masons from Philadelphia to teach the locals how to build it properly. And they ended up tearing the whole thing down. They started building it with stone quarried from southern Berks. They tore it all down. They went and got stone from Hummelstown and rebuilt the whole thing.
Thank you, Michelle.
And you all are researchers, so you know there's lots of rabbit holes you can go down when you're.
Michelle finds a bunch of them. Yes, she knows rabbit holes better than most. So this is Charles and Mary's grave. Mary was obviously before Charles Evans Cemetery was founded in 1846, since she passed away in 1836. Did I say 1846 in the beginning there?
No, you did say 18.
Okay, I thought I could have said something different.
So
She was obviously
this
not
is-
buried here. She was not buried here, but she had to be reinterred here when the cemetery was opened. So this is still on the original. This is probably on the outlying stretch of the original 25 acres where this is at. But when we see Charles's grave, so Charles did not live to see the gate completed. The easiest place, if you've ever been in Charles Evans Cemetery, if you're familiar where the Frederick Lauer pyramid is, it's right behind that. And here is the inscription that's on the stone. And how it's written here, this was truly who Charles was. Founder of the cemetery, which justly bears his name, an eminent lawyer. He was very successful as a lawyer, learned, faithful, eloquent, and exemplary citizen, public spirited, and generous in every sphere. Charles would not, no matter who he met on the street, he would always give them their courtesy and the time, presence of his time, and he would always treat them on a even level as anybody that he would, they all had the same ground as far as he was concerned. So what he's saying here on this slide and on his stone is actually very accurate. Whether it would be the old man up the street that he used to always walk by, he'd always pay him homage. If it was the little boy that was playing with, trying to identify bugs on the sidewalk, he would stop and talk to him. So it would make no difference. Here we have another from the 1864 collection of the gate. The gate looks pretty much still the same as it does. There's a little bit variance, small changes a little bit in some spots of it. But for the most part, it still looks pretty much still the same.
At one point after this, there was a fire. And so a lot of the wooden elements burnt and had to be deconstructed.
Like that little dormer you see right on the side of the main gate, that's no longer there. Here is the superintendent's house. Now, so this was actually a home that came out of if you want to call it a mail order catalog, go ahead, because that's exactly what it was. Cottage Residence is 1842. That's the
Came from A.J. Downing's books.
Mhm.
A.J. Downing's books. Was probably designed by A.J. Jackson, and that team really were responsible for popularizing the Gothic Revival style in the U.S. and the Romantics.
So before ordering a book a home out of the Sears catalog, you could have went to the cottage residences.
This is the design straight from the book, and it's we don't have very good pictures of the superintendent's cottage. This is enlarged from that. I think it was like a lithograph of the gateway.
Yeah, the superintendent's cottage existed until the 1920s when the current cottage was built and the current office was built. This was actually on the footprint of the office. This is where this is at. So here we see the photograph of the chapel. The chapel, 1852, it lasted about 100 years, actually. It was not used 100 years. It did fall into disrepair, and it found its ultimate fate by being struck by lightning in the mid-50s. By 1939, the chapel had already been moved down to the current chapel that's down along Fifth Street. Excuse me.
Rees was a really promising architect, and he was killed during the Civil War. He is buried at Charles Evans Cemetery. When the trustees wanted to construct the chapel, they asked for designs to be submitted, and they chose Grease out of the submissions. But John Carver who designed the gate, submitted a design, and his was not chosen. And then he passed away very soon after that, and his estate sued the cemetery because they felt that his design should have been charged. There was some kind of a settlement out of it. He wasn't happy that his design wasn't chosen, and neither was his, or his heirs or his executives.
So if we go to the next slide, the only thing that really does survive from the chapel are these
The stained glass.
stained glass from the chapel.
And that's in the office.
Mm-hmm. And today, the office, now in the beginning of Charles Evans Cemetery, the office was not on the grounds whatsoever. The office was located in the 500 block of Washington Street in Reading. So you would have been able to go to, if you wanted to do business with the cemetery, you would have had to go to the office there. It wasn't until 1925 that the office was moved here. This was a Muhlenberg Green.
No,
Frederick Muhlenberg?
Frederick.
Frederick A. Muhlenberg, sorry. This is a Frederick A. Muhlenberg.
5 Muhlenberg architects. If anybody's
I get confused with that all the time. Yes. So the new cottage that was built next door, so this is where the original cottage was, and that was demolished, and this was put in its place. And then here we get to see the new cottage. This was also built by Muhlenberg also as well. So we go down to 1939. We go to the current chapel, crematorium and columbarium. And this was built 1939. And we added a little bit extra flavor to that also, as well as this Florentine wellhead. Thank you.
The chapel and columbarium is kind of in the
Italianate, yes.
styles.
Back in the cemetery in 1886, William de Bourbon, who was the proprietor of the Mansion House at 5th and Penn Streets, downtown Reading, who was also a trustee of Charles Evans Cemetery, had this pavilion built in Charles Evans Cemetery. It was donated by him. It was, so it was something that he provided for the cemetery. So this was not in memoriam, it was donated to him by him. So and the architect was Alexander Forbes Smith for that.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at some of the monuments that are in Charles Evans Cemetery, one cannot stop. The place you start with, as far as a name is concerned, would have to be Herman Strecker. Herman Strecker came to Reading from, I think he came from Europe first. His father came from Europe. He came from, I believe, Philadelphia. Him and his father got into the carving business at 7th and Chestnut Streets, if I remember correctly. Herman had actually moved around quite a bit as far as who he worked for. He worked for himself. He worked for Eagle Marble Works, P.F. Eisenbrown. As two of the, he worked, like I said, his last monument, which we'll take a look at, he done that on his own. But we're looking, where he is buried at here, he is looking at one of his more famous pieces that he had done, which is the GAR monument. That was his work. The soldier that is at the top there, he was actually a bugler in the Civil War. That was Charles Gilliams. He's actually buried in Charles Evans Cemetery also. This is Herman Strecker's home on Mineral Spring Road. The Historic Review of Berks County had a story on Strecker in it, and it had a picture in that story. This was back in the 1940s, I believe. And when you look at the picture in there showed a picture of him at his office on the third floor, and you can clearly see those pointed windows at the very top, is looking out the window. This was Herman Strecker's home. Oh, hang on. Here we go. And one of the things that he was very known for is we show his famous turtle fountain at City Park. And we see his moth plates from the Field Museum.
So he was a world-renowned collector of butterflies and moths. He traded specimens with people all over the world, and he wrote about Lepidoptera, and his collection became the foundation of the Field Museum in Chicago, which at the time the curator was a Reading man, and that was the
Connection.
connection.
So if we go on, here is the GAR monument.
So I'll try to make it fast because we're going a little long. But
Yep.
there's a beautiful story that goes with this that was shared with me by a man named Richard Rader. That was spelled Roeder, pronounced Rader. And he owned a restaurant on 422. Some people might remember him. I think it's called the Red Plate, something like that now. But his grandfather was Henry S. Becker, and he was a machinist in the Philadelphia Reading car shops, and he lived on North 11th Street. And when he was finished with work, he would usually go out for a walk through City Park and maybe sometimes up in, onto the mountain a little bit. So there was a prison still in City Park at the time, and a pauper's graveyard where there were prisoners buried there, and maybe some other poor people who couldn't afford to be buried elsewhere. So he never really walked over there, but this one day he did, and he was thinking to himself, oh, I wouldn't know anybody buried there. And he looked down, and there were these rough boards with names on them, and he recognized two of the names as veterans of the Civil War that he knew. And he just was heartbroken. He came home and he started to tell his wife, and he got choked up and started crying. And the next day he went to work and he started to tell other veterans in the car shop about this. And so they all agreed that they wanted to do something to erect a monument and to move any veterans of the Civil War who were buried in various paupers cemeteries throughout the county and have them moved to. So they went to the cemetery trustees. The cemetery trustees agreed to donate a plot of land on the condition that they raised enough money to put a sizable monument. And I don't remember the exact amount of money, but it's actually in the minutes from that meeting where, they had to come up with something pretty significant. So they went to the Kine Post and the McLean Post, and I'm probably going to mess this up. I think the McLean Post was more like the enlisted men and the Kine Post was the officers. But they rallied all these veterans to the cause, and they raised enough money, and this was the result. And Charles Gilliams, as Rick said, was a bugler during the Civil War. He was a Reading man, and he posed as the model for Herman Strecker of the bugler at the top.
This is one of the nice stories out of the cemetery of one of the more prominent landmark monuments in the cemetery. There's another good one that we'll be telling you very soon as well. At the bottom of it, we get to see that this was actually made at the Eagle Marble Works, corner of 6th and Elm.
So that means Strecker was working for the Eisenbrown family.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. His last work that he did was for the Joseph and Anna DeLong, but it was actually done for their daughter, Caroline. This is the Heston DeLong Monument. This was when Strecker was actually a solo artist. This was like the last thing that he had actually done. He did this at his shop at 6th and Court Streets. So he was not working for P.F. Eisenbrown anymore at that time at the Eagle Marble Works. But this was his, the marble was actually brought from Italy. The marble was actually brought from Italy. He had carved it, and this is actually one of his signature. This is one of the primary key pieces in the cemetery that to pure work of art. Like I said, this is actually like an art gallery as well as it is a cemetery, and this is truly a work of art. Who was Caroline DeLong Heston? She was at, well, her father Joseph and her mother Anna. Joseph was actually the primary developer of the Perkiomen Avenue area around City Park and in that whole area. And actually, when you look at the home that they owned, this was the DeLong Heston home, because this was the DeLong home at first, and then when her parents had passed away, Caroline kept her residence there. She married Augustus Heston, who was actually a clerk in a department store in Philadelphia. That's where she met him. So she actually she lived off the rest of her parents' wealth from what they had done. And I can tell you, as a matter of fact, that the synagogue right next door, that was an empty piece of parcel. That was like one of the most hotly contested parcels of land in the city of Reading at the time of their existence. I can tell you also that how did she wind up getting Herman Strecker to do that carving for her, for that plot? If you walked out her front door and you looked right across the street, whose house was there but Herman Strecker's? So it wasn't too hard. Yeah, they knew each other that way, at least, or she at least knew who he was, and that's how she approached him. Here's another one of the more symbolic ones. This is of an artist. This is Albert Treat. Albert Treat was an aspiring artist. This shows some of the symbolism on the tree stump is a very big symbolism in the artist world of decorative headstones. The artist palette. He was he was a rising star in the art world, and his paintings are nowadays, I think, very much in demand. I think the Reading Museum does have a couple of them actually on hand. He died of something that claimed a lot of people back then, which was consumption.
And what is that?
And that would be basically, inability to breathe. Tuberculosis. Thank you. This is at the Wooten, another one of those symbolic tombstones with the tree stump, the cross, the ivy, the scroll, the leaves.
Possibly stuff.
Yes, another Strecker one with the cross. This is at the Boas site. Not a Strecker work, but she's always out there looking. She's right behind the English U that's in the background. As far as Charles Evans was just recently certified as a arboretum as well. And I can tell you for a fact that when I gave a tour of the cemetery a couple of years ago for the English and German visitors who were here for our 275th anniversary and who were here just a couple of weeks ago, they had told me we have a better English U than anything they have in England. So
we now at Charles Evans Cemetery have the largest English U in the state of Pennsylvania. Laurel Hill did have the largest one, and it died last year. So representatives from Laurel Hill came up and took seeds from this to try to germinate one and
propagate it. Yeah,
propagate it. Thank you, and get a new U going.
Another story is this stone. This is the stone of Calvin's cellars. The story that's interesting here is how many times do you hear the story that someone that you worked for, you had such high regard for, that everyone in the office put their money together and bought a monument like this for their fallen supervisor. He was the He was the supervisor of the Philadelphia and Pottsville Telegraph Company, which actually worked in conjunction with the Reading Railroad. Telegraph obviously was very key in the railroad. At the time when he was during the Civil War, he was in the Signal Corps. So he was not necessarily a soldier or a veteran per se, but because that was actually a separate body of work that was done during the war. They were not actually soldiers. However, after the war, stories about Calvin Sellers were just he was so good with organizing and setting up the telegraph system that after the war, he was working at a railroad down in the Philadelphia area where the two members of the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad came down. They asked them, how do we get our telegraph system up and running correctly? This is a story you just don't ever hear of, because at that time, I think they might have had like about a dozen different offices within the network of the Reading Railroad, Philadelphia and Reading Railroad, excuse me. And the gentleman from Philadelphia pointed to Calvin Sellers and said, hire him. He'll take care of it for you. And that's what they did. They actually hired him away from the office he was working at down there. He was actually originally from Altoona. So when he came up here, he turned that small office or network that he had as far as the telegraph. He had that the amount of offices were over 1,000 that he had. He went from like 12 to like 1,000 in a very short amount of time, I might add. And again, what claimed him was consumption also as well at a very young age. He lived with his mother at 6th and Walnut Streets. Today, that where his house would be is a parking lot at this time. However, when he passed away in, I believe, 1877, he didn't even work for the Philadelphia and Reading Telegraph Company for 10 years. I think it was like 1868 to 1877. And he died of consumption, and his employees were so heartbroken by losing their leader that they actually put their money together to buy this monument for him. And again, this was a Herman Strecker. This was done by the Eagle Marble Works. And it was at the time when this was done, the words that were in the paper at the time was it was customary when a significant work of art was done by the Eagle Marble Works that it was actually sit in their display room at 6th and Elm Streets before they would move it up to its final destination, which was in the cemetery. If we look at this, this is what it says on here: 1877, age 34 years, 4 months, 22 days, erected by the telegraph employees of the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad Company as a mark of respect to their lamented superintendent.
So this is the telegraph with the key, the relay, and the sounder. And then this is the telegraph line around Clapperthal Curve. And look at these ominous clouds gathering there and lightning strike there.
The only thing that would be insignificant, not complete on that, is it was customary if a key operator would have passed away or fallen, the mark of respect to that key operator would be that one of the lines would be down. And now it's just a crack in the stone that actually is showing it now. This is actually the office of the Eagle Marble Works at 6th and Elm Streets. So this is the area where that stone would have been shown for a couple of days before it was moved up. And Eagle Marble Works was an Eisenbrown company, P.F. Purnell F. Eisenbrown. Penrose. Did I say Purnell? I'm sorry.
Penrose.
So sorry. But yes. And this is right behind the Bourbon Pavilion in the cemetery. A lot of important names. There's not that far from here is George Bear. Right down below behind the tree, that mausoleum, as much as it has his name on it, he's not actually in there, and that would be William Loudon. Lots of interesting names within the cemetery. So we always have fun digging up some names as to who we're going to talk about every year. One of the more symbolic stones, a child. There's a lot of stones that you see are two infants or, our child laid to rest.
So in the mid to late 19th century, being a child from infancy to the age of 10 was the most dangerous time. More children died than adults. So today we don't think of that. Now we think, oh, well, old people die, children don't die, but children, like 28% of the children died before they reached the age of 10. And
Charles and Mary knew a little bit about that too. Yes, they did. Again, this one really just kind of gives us the idea of how the monuments to honor people, the obelisks, seem to be a very, very popular way. Because you can just see the whole area just surrounded by them.
so in Laurel Hill, it got so bad that the trustees actually put out a warning, and they wrote, obelisk succeeds obelisk, etc. The greatest bulk for the least amount of money, allowing marble to usurp good taste. And I always say, well, at Charles Evans, the trustees never said anything about it, but you can see obelisk succeeds obelisk, etc. there too. And there's a really big difference between that and those much more romantic carvings of the mid 19th century when the cemetery was founded. Once you get toward the end, it is really show-offiness. I don't know how to put that another way. But people with money trying to put up a great big monument and make a show. And on Center Avenue, they're putting up a big house to make a big show. And that was all the Industrial Revolution and the fortunes.
And today, the most prominent architectural feature still does remain the gate, as we can see. This is the gate from the inside. And when you come in that gate, if you happen to come in at Christmas time, you get to see Charles and Mary once again greeting you at Charles Evans Cemetery. So come see us during the Christmas tour, or come see us during the tours that we lead. We do that usually in the spring, and we reprise the same one in the fall. So come see us for that. And for Charles, myself, and for Mary, I say thank you.
So just a quick word. The tours that we do were done in conjunction with the Berks History Center or the Historical Society of Berks County. So you can check their coming events for when those are scheduled. And the Christmas open house is part of the Center Park Historic District annual Christmas house tour. But you don't need a ticket to get in to Charles Evans. We're just always on the tour and always open, and anybody can come in.
And we dress that all the time. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
The marvelous history lesson with all of the information you gave us. It's just wonderful. Thank you. Rick.
Thank you.
And Michelle. Thank you.
Any questions?
Is the Ontoloni Meeting House the one that's in the water?
No, it was moved.
It was moved.
But I mean, it would be on the water.
Right, it
Right.
would be if they hadn't moved it. Yes,
That's the one that's close to Leesburg?
Yes.
yes.
Actually not that far from the graffiti bridge, as a matter of fact. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, the cemetery's still down
Mm-hmm.
Well, they moved the graves.
there. You did what?
We moved the graves, yes.
Oh, they did.
Yeah, there's still, well, still.
Any- Well, they would, that's a good question. I don't know that answer.
The Quaker Meeting House.
Quaker Meeting House,
Because Lake Onalani was being.
where'd they get
built.
moved to?
Oh, I guess they got moved right to
meeting
the
house,
meeting
yeah,
house.
the
They
meeting
moved
house.
the meeting
Yeah.
house and the graveyard.
There's a map in the Quaker records of the original cemetery and who was all there.
Okay,
Does anybody online have questions?
No questions online.
okay. Well, thank you very
Well,
much.
thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting.
I have a question just off in my head. Who's the gas monument is the one that's very tall, and has the big angel in the top of it. The big angel.
Oh, the two, the angels on the,
It's on a not, it's on a very tall